Welcome to the Generation AI podcast, where we demystify artificial intelligence under the light and world of higher education. I am JC Bonilla, joined by my cat, I don't know if you hear the mouse, and my friend Ardis Kadiu. How's it going, Ardis?
I'm doing great, JC. I'm doing great. So we do have a special guest today. Is that what you're saying?
We have a guest, Dr. Jacques Cousteau.
Jack Cousteau.
I apologize, everybody, if you're picking up a little bit of feline voice. My cat just decided to join us. So hang out for the journey. We have awesome sound effects in a super special episode today. Ardis, how you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Yeah, this has been an incredibly full week of a lot of events. During our last episode, we talked a lot about things that were in the market and a lot of news around AI. Well, this week has been, very similar. And with the AI Action Summit happening in Europe, there's just so much going on.
That was fantastic. Was catching some clips. Everybody was there, but you and I. Just all I'm saying. They were missing two important guests.
It was in Paris, so it would have been great to be there.
It would have been you and I in Paris. Hey, Ardis, before we kick off the episode, which is a really interesting conversation, I wanted everybody to remember that we have these three series on Agentic AI, and we've been looking at our stats, and it's doing really well. There's a lot of appetite specifically for episode number 1. So everybody thinking about Agentic AI, want to understand Agentic AI, the evolution that it has on higher education, how does it impact around the world of multi-agent collaboration, so orchestration of many of them, and how does it change the workplace? Ardis and I did a 3-series episode, and it's doing super, super well on download. So everybody, keep at it. It seems that it hit a chord. Anything to add there, Ardis?
So our conversation around agentic AI is going to actually flow in to today's conversation as well. It kind of it fits really, really nicely, and it fits a little bit longer vision of where we're going to be in 2035, which is incredible. And that's kind of JC is going to lead this episode, and we're going to go through that for sure.
So today's episode, it's a combination of two ideologies. One, an observational ideology led by the one and only Sam Altman. He recently published a statement as a blog on 3 observations that now mixes really well with an empirical study, basically a data-driven report that comes from Anthropic that is labeled the Economic Index, in which we start seeing how this evolution of artists. There's so many animal guests today.
Oh my God, my dog
your dog just went off. Everybody. So I'm loving this episode. Brought you by Element 455, the zoo theme. Anyway. So we have Sam Altman given this interesting, bold vision about AGI. And then what we start seeing is how the reality of agentic AI in the workplace come and meet and how far we're going to be. By pairing these two visions, one empirical, the data from Anthropic, looking at actual conversations, we are actually doing a balanced reality check, right, Ardis? And it's going to be super fun, and I hope you guys all enjoy it. So, Ardis, let's start with 2 papers. First, let's throw it back at you. I did not see this Sam Altman's paper. How did you get this blog? How did you find out it? And then now we're going to be talking about just kind of the origin story of, oh my gosh, this is happening. And I can tell, do you want to tell the story about the Sam Altman, kind of the thesis and what's happening here? And then I'll do the Anthropic one.
Yeah, no, of course. So obviously, look, there's just so many interesting conversations that happen on X today and nowadays. So you almost have to be glued to it in order to kind of see a lot of the news that's happening and it's breaking there. So this is he posted it, and then I had a chance to review it over the weekend, and I thought it was really, really interesting. But essentially, this is in anticipation of his participation in the AI Action Summit in Europe, where this year's focus, as we see, has been clearly on how fast can we go, right? It's like fast, and then where are we going? Whereas last year, the tone of the conversations around these was around safety, and whereas this year it's all about, hey, this thing is actually going to happen and it's going to be moving really quick. So it's like, who's going to be there faster around? And we're talking about AGI or around this advanced AI systems. So the three claims here, or the thesis, is that AGI is coming, and its economic effect will be super exponential. So it's going to be, even more impactful than people think.
Right.
So the three claims, or the three assumptions, are that the intelligence of an AI model roughly equals the log of resources used to train and run it. What that means is that the scaling models are still there, and it means that the more compute we throw behind these AIs, the better models, the more advanced models we're going to get. So AI intelligence scales predictably with the investment that we have. Last week, we talked about DeepSeek.
Right.
On very little investment. Some folks are saying that, hey, that's a really good model. It's great, but it's equivalent to the work that OpenAI was doing maybe 9 months ago in terms of the compute. So it doesn't really compare in terms of how that investment. So we're already further along than that. The assumption number two is that the cost to use a given level of AI falls about 10 times every 12 months. And lower prices lead to much more use. So this is, we mentioned Javin's paradox, where if something becomes cheaper, there's going to be more demand for it, and hence it's going to be used a lot more. So in this case, what this is saying is the cost of AI is dropping 10 times every year, accelerating adoption. So 10 times every 12 months, meaning that if something was costing us, $10 to do last year, that cost has come down to $1. So if you had an application in the market that was based on how much AI you were using, expect that cost to go down. And this is an area where Element and we're very, very keen on, and we knew that the trajectory of this cost is coming down drastically, and we're focusing on how can we accomplish things better rather than focusing on the monetization of it. And we've had a monetization episode in the past as well. Number three claim or assumption is that the socioeconomic value of linearly increasing intelligence is super exponential in nature, right? So what that means is that the value of AI will increase at the pace never seen before in really human history. So it's again, this have deep implications, and also the implications are that AI agents will become ambiguous co-workers, essentially boosting productivity at unprecedented rates and levels.
Awesome. Let me now give everybody the perspective that comes from Anthropic. So Ardis just walked us through Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, with this logic model, if you will, that if predictability on the scale and investment, but at the same time we see a negative relationship on the cost to produce that, therefore we're going to have substantial application and benefit to humanity. So now Anthropic, it's looking at millions of anonymized conversations from Claude, which really gives an opportunity to understand how this is applied in the real work, and specifically this definition of a modern economy. So think about how these two papers are going to come and merge, and that's kind of what our episode is all about. So at the outset, and you can go on and see this research posted on their blogs. It has an actual download of the paper. They also made their data set available for anyone who wants to come and mine it. Super fun. And they're calling on researchers, economists, and social scientists to come and join this effort. But their claim is that the impact of AI labor is being observed today, specifically creating two important paradigm shifts. One that we've seen before, the one that is a highly uneven and concentrated type of AI, and we're going to come in and talk about that. It seems that it's doing better in certain parts of income, alluding to inequalities per se, and to specific tasks, right? Thinking about, automation and tasks, we're going to come and talk about that. So 3 key findings, Ardis. 36% of the occupations now use AI at least 25% of their tasks. So we have more than a third of occupations using it, and from that, a quarter of their workload has tasks running on AI. In terms of adoption, artists, our field, our profession, writing, not that one, software development and analytics, like what you represent and I are both worlds, is where the highest adoption is taking place. Writing kind of following that. And to the point of where in terms of jobs, where in terms of humans, this is basically seeing the largest adoption, utilization. It peaks in mid to high wage jobs. So if you think about the distribution of salaries, artists, so if you make $1, if you make $1 million, we can start generalizing what you do. So when this medium salaries are between 50,000 to 150,000 yearly, this is where we start seeing the most utilization of AI, alluding to what happens to highly paid individuals, not going there, but also the individuals and professionals who are in the lower distribution of income. So what does all this mean? Interesting. From the data, what we can see is Anthropic is reporting that AI may be a selective tool and not an all-encompassing workforce revolution. That it's an interesting provocative thought because Ardis, and this is what I want to tell you at the outset, like how do you combine these two? In a way, they're in odds. Altman telling us this is happening and all the inputs to the adoption and the revolution and impact are here. So therefore, it's going to be substantial surplus of benefit. Anthropic is telling us, but wait a minute. Today, what we start seeing is that is not an even distribution of benefit. So what are your big points and what are you taking at the outset? Like, so we can, before we go in and jump in and start breaking this down.
Yeah, I want to highlight that one thing I wanted to kind of explain is that what Anthropic did, which is really, really cool, is that they've built a pipeline of usage from their Claude models. So they actually see all of the usage that's happening. And what they're doing is they're distilling the questions into different categories or the work that's coming from there, and they're distilling that and they're saying, hey, this is, let's say that, you from Element, we did a lot of coding in there, and they're like, okay, this is how much coding was done, and this is kind of the area, and we know that certain questions come from certain fields, and those are the topics that are being asked. So what they did is they kind of put together an anonymized set of data, just looking at the conversation topics and the conversation components in order to produce this, this correlations and data. So this is real world usage today and what's happening today. And when you look at OpenAI's or Sam's kind of three observations, is that what he is basing it on is three assumptions or three observations that are holding true in the world of AI today. And he's projecting this.
And self-serving, right?
Correct. Exactly. So he's projecting it in the future, right? So those are very, very different. So we're seeing what's happening today, real world, Anthropic research, and then projection of what can happen in the future and what he's kind of seeing. So two totally different things. They go really nicely together though.
So let's jump into some, I would say, inferences that Ardis and I are starting to draw and how we can have this conversation around this picture that in this podcast and in this show, we're basically cumulatively building, right? So in number one, we've been talking a lot about the digital worker and the emergence of the AI workforce. So Ardis, let's have the conversation about how fast this is happening, because Altman is telling us this will take place and it will be a super-exponential growth, right? AI, he's talking about this kind of scalable logarithmic aspect of compute and investment. What does that mean is that it doubles and it doubles. So right, it's the compounding effect, as you all know, right? The pace of economic change actually surpasses the one that we've seen in semiconductors, right? The Moore's law, right? And AGI will basically impact and enable everybody. In a way, he's saying democratization of AI for all. A data-driven reality, Anthropic. Well, AI use is deep in certain professions. 4% of the occupants of the occupations in this kind of subset, they use AI in 75% of their tasks. So many of us in our sector, and I guess that's you and I in that subset, we're so bullish in adopting this, but 96% of the workers are still not there, right? So AI impacts varies across industries. So
And this is something that we have like intuitively seen from our conversations, both organizations and also what we're seeing on the institution side. Our conversation work with a lot of them. The adoption is very choppy. Like yes, everybody's talking about it, but the actual real work that they're doing and how they're adopting it is very low, and it's slower than we anticipated.
so would you think that Sam Altman is overestimating the impact of AGI?
Well, I don't think he's overestimating it. I just think that the traditional chatbot interface adoption that's happening with Anthropic or with Claude or even ChatGPT, like people are not using it as much, or the adoption. We talked last week around CSU having access the largest deployment or of ChatGPT on a campus. So that's a really delayed adoption. So we're not seeing that today, but it doesn't mean that the adoption will not accelerate over the next year or two. And when we talk about AGI, it's interesting because for the first time, I believe we got a definition of AGI, right?
Yeah.
So AGI, one of the first paragraphs is like AGI is a weakly defined term, but generally speaking, what they mean by AGI is it to be a system that can tackle increasingly complex problems at a human level in many fields. So nobody really knows what this thing, for all we care and for all we know, some of these models are, already there. They're already doing, the work, and they're tackling complex problems at a human level in many fields. We talked about deep research agent that was released the other last week. That is doing the deep work or research that's happening on, that they can do it at the PhD level, right? And that's very sophisticated work that's getting done. So if anything, the one thing that I got out of this article is we now have some form of definition of what AGI is. And it's going to be a gradient slope, meaning that it's going to come slower and slower and slower rather than something that's once of a sudden we have AGI, right? So the definition is going to progress.
So Ardis, fair. And sure, I can see how the construct of AGI is interesting, and sometimes making it looser is beneficial. But now contrast with the looser definition, right? So Claude is telling us, or this research from Anthropic is telling us, 37% of the industry in computer science, mathematics, it's already benefiting from this, adopting, right? Now, in contrast, think about where you and I speak a lot, office and administrative jobs at 7.9%. And if we're going to look at the difference between, let's say, a computer programmer, 6.5% versus a statistical assistance, 0.4%. So, because what I'd love for you to react to is the straight out task of doing statistical analysis. It's so easy for LLMs and this type of AI. So is coding. But somehow the industry, computer science and programmers benefit from it more than when you label them office assistants. What do you think is happening here? Why is this lagging? Is it fear? Is it that I'm, because I'm not in the cutting edge of doing AI? Like, what do you think is happening here, right? And you speak to so many administrators, so wondering if you have a point of view here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've done over the past couple of weeks, I've talked to a lot of folks that are go-to-market, go-to-market teams, and how they think about it. And as you talk to them, it's like, well, are you using, like, let's say ChatGPT or any AI tools? And this is on marketing, sales, things like that. And the adoption there, it's kind of lukewarm, right? Some folks are, yes, we're using it. Some are like, well, yeah, maybe. At the leadership level, you see a lot less yes,
Right.
a lot more no's, or like, yeah, kind of. But, what you hear is, well, we're using the AI that's baked in tool X, or we're using the AI baked in tool Y. So where I'm sitting is, yes, there's going to be a new application, which is going to be the AI agents and the chat components like ChatGPT and the generic AIs there. But the majority of us are going to use AI in our tools that we use day to day. And because of that, adoption is not quite there. of those tools and the acceleration of the AI applications are not on the market just yet and embedded in our day-to-day work, we're seeing this kind of gap. But yes, eventually next year, everybody's going to be using it. But today we're measuring the usage of AI based on are you using ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude? And we're not even thinking about all the other tools that
That's a great point.
we're using today, but which have AI baked in them, and it's actually incorporated as part of your workflows.
Yeah.
If you use Grammarly, you use AI today. If you use, Google autocomplete, you use AI today. So all of those different tools and those workflows will have or maybe have AI today. Is just that you don't realize it, and it's not the chat interface that you're using with ChatGPT.
Yeah, super fair point. So from a like methodology point of view, there's a research bias here that whomever uses
Correct.
Claudes of the world, by definition, they may enter these professions in a more normal way. Now, let's move to our second talk point here, and it is connected to what I just asked Ardis, the difference between the computer scientist or the office administrator, and they're both doing technical things. Why one dominates? Why there seems to have more incentives rather than the other one? So all of us have been talking about, well, because AI should always optimize for automation, optimization. So those are the use cases. So something really interesting that happens here is the debate between automation and augmentation, right? So, and I think augmentation, if it's not clear to everybody, is how you start thinking about creating tasks that support you versus the orchestration of things to replace you, the automation. So Altman's viewpoint is that when we reach these stages, AI would look like a junior coworker. It enhances human work rather than replacing it. He's more in the augmentation camp here. The virtual coworker will take on junior levels of knowledge work, alluding to a hierarchy. We spoke a lot about hierarchies on our second episode of our Agentic series. And AI will empower individual creativity rather than the cost mass displacement fear that everyone is talking about. I'm really side with these three, and I think it makes a lot of sense. From data, Anthropic's findings are the 57-43 divide. So 57% of the AI use cases are augmentative. Collaboration, interactive, human in the loop. So these tasks that basically put you in the center, but not replacing you. Whereas 43% are automation. Attempting, the conversation looks like it's trying to replace the human in execution. So here is the divide between automation and augmentation. Ardis, throwing these stats at you, how did you land with this divide? For me, it was like, whoa, wow. I was surprised that augmentation dominated rather than automation. So how did these two things, automation versus augmentation, that debate land in your head?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about knowledge work, there's just a lot of, if we're replacing knowledge work, or if we're amplifying, if we're thinking about knowledge work that we do day to day, there's a certain component of that knowledge work that requires some higher level thinking or some orchestration that these models are not quite there yet, right? And that's what we're talking about as AGI level models and AI gets better, and these agentic workflows become better. We really haven't seen them come in yet. So the part where humans and augmentation comes in is like, yes, I have amazing assistants that work and help me out, but they can't do things on their own just yet. They're not powerful enough, and they can't kind of reason about certain things, for longer periods of time. So the best way that we can amplify ourselves is by having a human be a 10x employee or 20x engineer or 50x or 100x, right? So the augmentation part is really, really important. The other part that I hear quite a bit is around automation. If you think about automation, it simplifies something that if we're going to leave AI on its own and automate a process, a lot of those processes cannot have false positives or cannot have error rates, right? So the error rate of AI today, or generative AI in these models, there's still hallucinations and there's still error rates. In some cases, they're very, very small. However, a lot of those workflows and automations expect almost flawless or very, very high accuracy on those. And by definition, generative AI and these models, there's variations in there. So they're not 100%, they're not deterministic, right? So we need to do a lot more work around systems to make sure that we catch those errors and we fix them. So those workflows are not yet incorporated. It's much easier to do something in code and kind of say, hey, this is deterministic. It's much easier and cheaper to just do it in code and say, I'm going to automate this process this way. But where thinking comes into place, then you can plug in an LLM in there, or you can plug in some of that smarts. I was having this conversation yesterday with the team, or with Petter actually, from our engineering, and it's like, well, we have this reasoning component that we want to build, or this orchestrator, and it's like, we're thinking, okay, what's cheaper? Do we just go with like some very simple heuristics and kind of a direct computer, like a loop, and start thinking about it in a more deterministic way? Or do we go through and have a decision LLM or decision engine that's making those decisions? That decision engine is going to be much more nuanced and is going to expect new abilities to come in, but it's not going to be 100% accurate, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult and cost prohibitive to include in there, because these automations are going to run very, very often. So 2 considerations: accuracy and cost around automation.
And I would say there's also a third dimension in which these stats suggest that the story of fear automation, it's automation as displacement of the human labor, is not there, and I think it's going our way. I think it's going our way. If these stats came overwhelming towards automation, because of your point that the technology is not there.
You mean replacement?
Yeah, replacement. Yeah. When I think about automation, the way, at least the way I read the paper, is trying to understand the angle of fully replacing the human with executional tasks. And we're not there, thank God, because to your point, the systems are not there, right? So as this progresses, my hunch is that these numbers probably will level up, and by industry, you'll probably start seeing that computer scientists and whatnot start looking at mathematicians, start looking at higher rates of automation, and the other sectors maybe not. All right, this last question on this segment. So you're talking to the company, and you do a lot of this, but now this is not Petter, a technical team, right? Thinking about when, as a CEO, as a leader, you're talking to marketers, office reps, basically the entire ecosystem of the organization. And then the key here is to incentivize augmentation tasks, right? It's hard to do it, right? And do you have any words of advice on how do companies, schools, and leaders should incentivize augmentation? And again, by what we mean with that is the introduction of AI for collaboration, interactive, human-in-the-loop type of work.
Yeah. Well, look, there's real gaps that we see on our workforce today, and the ability to provide support to our customers, and in our case, higher education students, right? So we are short-staffed. We can't answer all their questions. We're usually not there 24/7, so that student has to wait. They're filling in a form on the website in order to get an answer. They're coming to the office and scheduling an appointment, sometimes for weeks later, in order to get kind of course advising, or to figure out like what to do with their kind of career advice, and so on and so forth. So where we see AI being really, really good, and is around filling those gaps where humans are just not there, right? We cannot support somebody 24/7. It's just not the availability of how we work. So, when you think about the augmentation, don't think about it just the work that you're doing in real time and augmenting your output, but think about augmenting like the outcome as well. So if you're doing that outcome, if you're doing the outcome and you're answering that phone, can the AI answer that question? And then you can focus on other higher important, things? Or can the AI do that off hours? So it's like you have this hybrid mode that we talked about before, where AI is there, but it's off hours and they're responding off hours, whereas you're doing it during office hours. And then the types of questions that are available are different. So the workload can be, weighed a little bit differently.
One thing that I give you a lot of credit for, and any leader I'm recommending you build, at the company you do these all hands where basically the inspire aspect of AI is done. So recently you call a whole company meeting, see how Google Gemini could do AI against your Google Family Suite, Drive, Slides, and Deck. If you recruited our director of AI Ops, Doug, to do that, it was fascinating to see people react like, oh, now I can do this and XYZ. So that inspiration, the art of the possible, needs to be showcased. And there needs to be some hand holding, and the forcing function needs to be created, right? So also recently at the company, we've asked everybody to put an hour in their calendars and think about AI and kind of send videos and whatnot. So leadership needs to incentivize this, and the play seems to be on augmentation. All right, Ardis, we have 2 more points. I'm excited about this one because the hippie JC, going back to my data for good days, gets a scratch and love here. So AI impact across wage and skill. Altman implies that AI for all, AI benefits for all. Specifically, it will lift everybody. Any individual will have more benefit and will be impacted than never before. And economic prosperity, right, across all levels. Very benevolent. Love that, especially because you and I are so embedded into the AI ecosystem. Anthropic, on the other side, are telling us that this is being seen specifically on mid to high wage jobs the most. As I said before, it seems that it peaks on these $50,000 to $150,000 median salaries a year, but rarely we're seeing it on elite or low wages professionals. So AI adoption is strongest in certain cognitive works, which it reminds me so much to this evolution that we saw on the knowledge economy, right? And how it starts to basically benefiting some other people. So talk to me about how you see economic mobility through this, if any. So what do you see here, man?
I mean, this is a story that hasn't been written yet, right? And we can speculate it all we want, but we talked very briefly around access and the access that folks have around AI. And one of the things that Sam and OpenAI has done, or at least they're thinking about, is like, how do we bring the cost drastically down? And when that cost is down, then we have more access for everybody to use this advanced technology, and then the prosperity comes because of that usage. So the prosperity comes just pure exposure, adoption, how we're able to do certain things that we weren't able to do before. We can accelerate, economic benefits from it. Think about some of the efficiencies, and I'm going to go not political, but just essentially around efficiencies, right? Think about our U.S. government, and think about all of the work that the Doge team, or at least they're looking at, to do. And one of the things that comes up over and over again is not that people are bad instinctively, right? Or they're not doing their jobs. It's just that processes and the way we've always done it sticks around for a really long time. And what happens is that those processes do not evolve to match the new demands. And hence there's a lot of callus that's built, and there's inefficiencies that get built into the systems, and they get piled on and on and on and on and on. So when we look at the potential for AI is in bringing in the cost of replacing those processes down to a level where it would be insane not to actually do it, right? So if somebody sees and says, oh, I'm going to gain 20% efficiency, and it's like, nah, you know what? Like just the idea of changing a process or changing a system, if it's only 20%, you're going to live with it. But if something is 10 times more efficient or 20 times better and more efficient, and the ROI is 20 times more, then you're going to think very differently. And this is in the world of software development. When you build something against an incumbent, it has to be 5, 10 times better in however you measure that in order for you to displace that incumbent. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of friction there. So we see the same way with AI and the AI adoption. It's going to replace things when the cost differential of doing it the old way versus, the AI way is 10x or 20x more efficient.
I do agree with you that this book is not written, and we're just basically starting with chapter 1, not chapter 2 type of vibes, and the story can go in multiple directions. But I've seen this movie before, Ardis. I've read a book like this before, and it stems from something that you and I are very close to, right? I am associating this with data science. When it first started as a field, many people like us overnight, we self-label ourselves, or someone told us we are data scientists. What is that? And you start benefiting from it. What does that mean? Then fast forward 10 years later, the industry brought in the data scientists, the machine learning, the data engineer, and then all of a sudden, like the business intelligence professionals, the analytics people, all that ecosystem got lifted, right? So what I'm expecting here is incredible mobility, and it's going to be in a sector, and it's going to move. And then people who are adjacent to this skill. So you may be a programmer, you may be a linguistic expert, you may be a very good critical thinker, you benefit from this wave. But the word that you mentioned is displacement. At the end, I do think that's going to take place, because what I saw with this analogy in data science, there was a displacement for a classically trained statistician, the actuarial science, like those type of fields that were rooted in a data science alike profession, and then in a way get displaced. And this is the analogy that I love, right? PhD trained kind of person, me, all of a sudden I'm competing with a high school person who has never gone to a higher education, and she is 10 times better in data science than me, right? That basically was the machinery that allowed data science to be really, really interesting. So it displaces and it opens up opportunities for career paths that are new. So we'll see how it all unpacks. And I think in the short term, the economic benefits will probably be more narrow. All right, our last point. There was something about who owns this. So the story of this chapter of the book is being written, but many more chapters are forthcoming. So who owns that? Who writes that? And I think that is really interesting to understand how the economic benefit. It's something that, Sam Altman and OpenAI, with their mission of bringing AGI to us, it's for public good, right? So when thinking about economic benefit, and the AI knowledge economy, if you will, right? So Saltman thinks that compute budgets for AI and for all, right? Thinking about there's a public good, thinking about giving everyone access to advanced compute, right? I think you mentioned this before about the laptops for all, right? So kind of brings that idea, right? So the idea is that we must build the infrastructure, and there's a lot of initiatives that come from OpenAI and others. The Paris Summit, it was so heavy on, we will take the lead, country X, country Y, right? And it's all about building the roads, electricity. So everyone wants to electrify the AI pipelines, right? But it has that benevolent aspect, right? So is it really an AI democratization and like uplift of civil benefit and economic equality? I don't know, right? And then when I mirror this, when I look at it through the lens of Anthropic findings, more narrow, software, analytics, mathematics, STEM adjacent, if you will, and the physical labor, kind of the face-to-face jobs, service jobs, minimal adoption. So are there the tale of two cities? How do you bring this all together, right? And what are the parallels that you see here, man?
I think you're absolutely right. So right now, like we said, like there is what AI is really good at right now is that knowledge work, and specifically knowledge work that is a little bit more systems thinking or like systematic, or there's rules that can be so the engineering work, coding, there's just a lot of that out there that the systems are really good at trained on. And we haven't gotten to the place where an AI can look at a particular problem and reason if they hasn't seen before in any industry and reason about it. So there are tools and agents, agentic AI that's getting built for vertical different areas in order to fill in those gaps. But the physical world is not quite there, and robotics is one of those areas where is going to be the next phase. So if you listened to Jansen Wang's keynote, and I think we talked about this very briefly, you had perceptive AI, which started, this is kind of the deep learning AI. We have perceptive AI that started in 2012, where AlexNet, the AI, was able to perceive the world. So he knew images, he could see images, he could he can listen to voices, he can synthesize stuff, he can do natural language processing. Then you moved on to generative AI. So now instead of listening to that stuff, you can generate and have conversations with you. The next one was agentic AI. Now, instead of just speaking and kind of having conversations, it can actually act and do things on its own. So you have agents, right? This notion of AI assistants, and that's what we are talking about today. But the next wave that you talked about is physical AI, right? It's like how do you look at the world around you and kind of act on that, act on that world. So that's physical AI. It's kind of the self-driving cars and general robotics. So that is the next wave that is going to be accelerating. And I think that that's something that it's not going to be here for another couple of years. So we're going to see like mass adoption around that in a couple of years.
Yeah, and I love that you keep on bringing back the vibe of slow down. You can generalize. Many more things need to be built. But I guess to wrap up, to benefit from this and to be part of this, we need to be mindful that the AI training or reskilling, right? It's a thing. You need to continue to evolve. Infrastructure investments, whether it's in robotics and multiple things like that, need to continue to play out, right? If we bring this home to higher education, my takeaway here, Ardis, is the AI fluency across all disciplines, not only technology, right? As in a way, this is what this research is indicating, is kind of where it's at, right? You and I spend so much time thinking about how AI could solve the student engagement problem that higher education faces and what the opportunities are there and so forth, right? But we need our counterparts to meet us with, I get it and I know how to deploy. So AI fluency, to be generalist, it's kind of where I land is. So any thoughts on that before we kind of wrap up? But I guess what I wanted to say is I get it. It makes a lot of sense. More things for common. Investments will match, but everybody do your part. And your part right now is be fluent in AI. And that means educational, understanding what it does and how to bring it. So start thinking about augmentation, as we mentioned in the prior episode.
I think that's spot on. I think we're seeing that be preventing the economic gaps. You really need that AI training and reskilling. You need AI's kind of public infrastructure, so government-backed AI access or open source, right, or other initiatives that are treating AI as the infrastructure. So electrification, like they treat it as like electricity, and how do you get access to it? That's really, really important. Think about back in the day where like we talked about the laptops in schools and giving access to that. Like if somebody did not have internet, like internet became a huge mobility. Think about AI in that same way. Folks need to be exposed to that. Those who are going to get exposed to it earlier are going to be, better off in the future because they're now going to be advancing a lot faster. Chances are, if you had internet access or if you had a computer in your house, as if you were younger, then chances are that you are in a very, very different position right now. In terms of the adoption, you entered a STEM field, or so those are things that exposure by definition gives you the ability to think through how this can be used to solve problems as a tool, and then you start using that tool more and more, and that's how you get proficient in it. So
awesome. Well, everybody, I hope you have enjoyed our recap of these two different thinkings and approaches to where we're going. Future forward logic model from Sam Altman, positioning AGI with three ideas, and how Anthropic is starting to see the utilization of conversations in cloud today. In the near term, Ardis, I think what these reminds us is there is deepening adoption and impact of AI in certain fields, but many other fields will gain and probably catch up, right? Yes, AGI, it seems that is around us. It's coming, right? And it could be an accelerator. Need to keep eye on the equalities and the control. How do we think about that, right? So I think who benefits, question mark. And I appreciate your points that let's slow it down. It's not written yet. At the end of the day, right, the AI workforce is upon us in adaptation. And it's kind of the punchline.
The only thing is for sure that you need to get exposure and you need to start using it and you need to start thinking about adoption. So that is not going to go away. So we can talk about timelines. We can talk about everything else. Adoption. Start. I guess that's the only, that's the only thing that is going to be true today, tomorrow, next week, in a year. If you don't start, if you don't, implement, if you don't adopt, you're going to be left behind. And that is the only one thing that I can say for sure. And I guess I can bet you on it, or you can count. I don't know what other euphemisms, to use around it, but hope you've enjoyed this episode, everybody. It was a little bit deeper and thinking it through, like how this kind of leaders are thinking about both from a future looking perspective, because they're building and investing billions and billions of dollars on this, but also what the state is today and kind of how different industries are using it, with some deep research as well. We're really excited about this. We're pragmatic in how it gets adopted and how it gets used, but at the same time, we're very enthusiastic in kind of the ability for us to amplify ourselves and to augment what we do and build real impact to both of our students, to our customers, and to, essentially to a lot of folks, to our industry overall. Till next time, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed leaders and professionals like you find their next big idea. They feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts, like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Brian Gross, and many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.